Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. We are delighted to have you join us for this Blue Marble webinar with Nora Murphy Johnson. Nora is a longtime developmental evaluator and principles-focused evaluator. In the principles-focused evaluation book I did, she contributed a very powerful chapter called Walking Lumina, a personal principles-based evaluation philosophy, in which she made it poignantly and powerfully clear how her principles inform her practice. She is now doing creative evaluation work around social justice, and her values and principles inform all of what she does. So she's going to share with us that way of engaging from the point of view of the Blue Marble principle having skin in the game. The Blue Marble principle of having skin in the game basically posits that we all have a stake in the future of the planet, both the planet's ecosystem and humanity. We are not outside the planet or the ecosystem. There is no planet B. And so in that sense, we all have skin in the game. That's a term that's used in gambling originally that means that you have wagers at stake. You're not just, it's an interesting juxtaposition to the idea of stakeholder, because a stakeholder in gambling does not have skin in the game. A stakeholder holds the other people's bets, but does not bet themselves. Skin in the game means that you are betting, that you can lose or win by how things turn out. And so it makes the evaluator a stakeholder, but also a player. And that became one of the Blue Marble principles, is to acknowledge the ways in which we are affected by how the world unfolds and our contributions to it as evaluators. So Nora has been very much from that frame of reference throughout her professional career and her personal life, and she's going to share with us what that means and how she engages from the perspective of skin in the game. Are we able to pull up her slides?
Do you want me to do
No.
it? Okay, I will share.
Yep.
Here we go.
It's all yours, Nora. Thank you for doing this. We appreciate your being with us.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for showing up, whatever time of the day it is for you. Welcome to Identifying and Living into Your Personal Principles, what it truly means to have skin in the game. This is something that I've been thinking about a lot, really for the last 5 years. And so what I'll do today is take you through my journey. So Charmaine, if you could do the next slide. The flow for today, I'm actually going to start with the end. Just I hope that we can continue this conversation. There's a great chat function here, and I'd be delighted if you all would chat in the chat function. But then once this Zoom room closes, we won't be able to continue the conversation. So I have a slide on that. I'll do an introduction to me. I'm going to share some of the assumptions that undergird my work. I think they're important to understand as I move into the next parts, which is what I think it means to have your whole person in the game, not just your skin. What it looks like for me to have my whole person in the game. So I have some specific examples, and then I'll share with you how I developed my personal guiding principles. All right, so I will share these slides with you afterwards, or hopefully Charmaine or Glenn will help me. I put a hashtag skin in the game and some Twitter accounts that you can tag. So I look forward to seeing you all on Twitter. All right, so I don't know how many of you have read the book. I have, and like most of Michael's books, I'm gonna need to read it a number of times. Because there's always layers upon layers of meaning. What I really took away from this book is a calling to take responsibility for who I am and what my role is in the Anthropocene. Now, I'd never heard that word before. I don't even know if I say it correctly, but I know that what it means is that we've left the Holocene. And the Holocene was the last geologic era. And the Holocene was much more predictable and stable. And whereas now we're experiencing less predictable systems, weather and otherwise, we're coming out of a period with more predictability, and it's hard to know what to do. So the way that I've worked to work in uncertainty and systems and complexity is to work with principles and to see myself as not separate from the system. I'm not separate from the system. So seeing myself as separate from the system was something I used to do, and it took a lot of energy because it was a false belief. So this is my response to being an evaluator in the Anthropocene. So thanks for the invitation, Michael. So I'm going to start just by telling you a little bit about me, since I am a whole person. You can go to the next slide. I am a wife, a mother, an aunt, a daughter, a niece, mother. These are my most important roles. Those are my two boys at the top. I just got married 2 years ago to my wonderful husband. We had an amazing wedding. I grew up in New Hampshire, and that mountain at the bottom is the mountain that I saw every day when I was growing up. It's called Mount Monadnock. It means stand alone. And I didn't realize how much I oriented myself to the land until I moved out here to the Midwest of the United States, which is flat. And I find myself disoriented all the time. I don't know where to look. Two other things that you are, I think, influence the way that I think. One is I have synesthesia or synesthesia. So I think and I see in color. All of my letters and numbers have colors and emotions. So I can't imagine experiencing the world not through color. And lastly, I've been thinking a lot lately about energy and life energy and what it means to give our greatest gift, which is, I think, in part our gift of life energy. So that's a little bit about me personally. Professionally, I just co-founded a company called Inspire to Change 4 months ago. And this is me living into my evaluation purpose. And so Inspire to Change is purpose-driven change and change-making around the globe. And it's important that it's purpose-driven. This to me relates to what is my responsibility in the Anthropocene. And so we had to articulate our own purpose and Inspire to Change, which is currently my purpose, which is co-creating a whole beautiful and just world. And I'll talk a little bit about that later. So let me start with my assumptions. Most of you don't know me, so you don't know how I think. So I'm going to just go through some assumptions one by one. So my first one is that we're interconnected and interdependent. And this is a theme that you see all the time in Blue Marble in the book. When I say interconnected, I mean that we're all connected internally, physically, spiritually, emotionally, and mentally, but we're all connected to each other. We are human beings, we're connected to each other, we're connected to other living things. When I say interdependent, I mean that we're each in relationships where we mutually rely on each other, but we're also autonomous and separate beings. Certainly when I learned how to do evaluation, the only living things we talked about were humans, unless we were talking about environmental project or something that was directly related to nature. But I think that's part of what got us in this trouble, is seeing humans as somehow separate from all other living beings. My next one is that transformative work is both individual and collective. And you'll hear, this is going to be a theme I repeat over and over. I've learned that thinking about the work as out there and outside of us is not true, that we can't see the change we want to see in the world unless we're willing to be that change. So there is no professional development that isn't also paired with personal development. My next assumption is that we care, and I mean active caring. That's deep listening with compassion and empathy and a willingness to act with courage. So this isn't a heart feeling only, it is a heart feeling paired with acting on that feeling. The next one is that transformative work is rooted in place. I have just been thinking about the idea that everything alive is rooted in some way. And when we talk about culturally responsive evaluation and all these approaches to doing evaluation right, at the heart of all of them is that the work should be rooted in the place and the culture and the language and the aspirations of the people most impacted by the work. So we think a lot about roots now in terms of history and language and culture, because whatever we build on top of these roots must be connected to the roots in order to live and to thrive. We need to pair an inspiring and compelling vision with active hope. If you've read Michael's principles-focused evaluation book, he has the, I can't remember the word, but the acronym guide to evaluate principles, and my favorite letter is I, inspiring. I've definitely found that doing change work is hard, and what keeps people coming back is often a heart connection and a feeling of inspiration. And again, that gets back to what I was talking about energy, is the sense of inspiration, I think energizes people when things are hard. And so that inspiring and compelling vision allows us to work actively towards the thing we hope to see. We can't do this alone. I absolutely never work alone anymore, even if the project is very small and seems to only require one person. Our world is too complex for me to understand it through my own lens and my own experiences. We have to take risks. Because we're developing something new, we are going to make mistakes, and that's okay. If we don't risk, we don't have skin in the game, right? So actually doing something that matters to us, that we care about, because we're trying to find a new and better way to do things, means that we must also be okay with failing sometimes. And I find that that's something that I need to do, but I also have to coach my teammates with this and coach my clients. And like, guess what? We have to prepare all of ourselves to fail and to look at that as success if we're moving forward and we learn from it. The next one, what I hope for is a just world, and a just world requires wholeness and beauty. I have a degree in quantitative methods, and definitely during that training, we never talked about wholeness or beauty. But what I found is that people, communities, cultures, our world has been fractured, and that the only way to get to a world that's thriving is to come back into wholeness. And that requires picking up our scraps and our fragments and the parts of ourselves that we've denied and bringing it back together. It requires beauty, because beauty stops us in our tracks and it makes us consider something other than our own problems. It makes us reach for something better and more beautiful. So here's one of my favorite quotes about wholeness. It says, "A fault line runs down the middle of my life, and whenever it cracks open, divorcing my worlds and actions from the truth I hold within, things around me get shaky and start to fall apart." And so I work a lot with people and organizations about what it means to have the greatest possible energy source by being whole and not fractured. I also have two favorite quotes on beauty that Mary Oliver said: "We need beauty because it makes us ache to be worthy of it." And Elaine Scarry, who actually does research on beauty, says, "Beauty quickens, it adrenalizes, it makes the heart beat faster, it makes life more vivid, animated, and worth living." So those are my assumptions. that I'm going to take into this next part. And I actually changed it a bit. Instead of what it means to have your skin in the game, I changed it to what it means to have your whole person in the game. I was thinking about how I can actually lose a little bit of skin and still be okay. So what I do is I don't put a little bit of my skin in the game. When I work, my whole person is in. So I'm going to talk about what it means to have your whole person in the game. So we have this 5-step process here that we use at Inspire to Change. And I've been working on this for a couple of years now. And it actually came out of Michael's book on utilization focused evaluation. The primer book has a list of maybe 28 steps. I can't remember how many. And I thought, if I were going to write steps for what I do, what would those steps be? And these are the steps that I came up with. They looked different couple years ago, but here's where we are now. So the overarching categories of having your whole person in the evaluation game is 1, know people. 2, hold a transformative vision. 3, take transformative action. 4, reflect. And 5, repeat. And so I'm going to walk through each of those. So know people. Believe it or not, it starts with knowing yourself. And knowing yourself with love and acceptance. As Michael says in the Blue Marble book, we're each in our way, part of the problem and part of the solution. But we can't fully take responsibility for this if we don't even know who we are. I don't know about you, but I spent a lot of my life thinking that I was too big in some spaces and not enough in other spaces. That I was too female in some spaces and too this and too that. And so I would always show up with the version of myself that seemed most pleasing at the time. And I stopped knowing who I was as a whole person. I didn't have any spaces left in my life where I was complete. And what I found, though, by not being complete, is that when I walked into evaluation settings to facilitate, people were reading me all the time, right? Like, I am the most powerful influence in an evaluation setting. And so if I show up and I am triggered, or I have baggage, or I'm hiding parts, or I'm insecure, or whatever it is, the room reads it, even if I'm not aware of it. So part of being a good evaluator with my whole self in the game is I actually have to know myself, which means going into some places that I don't want to go. Like, some parts of me I hid a long time ago for a reason. Know others. So even when I fully know myself as well as I can at any point in time, I am limited on what I can know by what is natural to me through my identity, through my language, through my culture, through my age. And that's not enough to understand complex problems. So like I said, I always work in teams. One of the reasons that I work in teams is because we need to have multiple perspectives. We need to know how the world looks and feels and sounds through different worldviews and different bodies and different experiences. So I also spend a lot of time, because I can't know someone from everywhere in the world, I consider learning about social movements and history and current events all part of being an evaluator. And then last, know how people change. The public health model here is give someone information, they will change what they know, which will change their attitudes and beliefs, which will change their behavior. And I have certainly not found that to be true in my life. So what does make people change? And there's all kinds of change models out there. I find a lot of them not very useful. So the one that I use is Peter Senge talks about creative tension in his book, The Fifth Discipline. And he talks about transformation taking the ability to see really clearly where you are and really clearly where you want to be. And that tension itself, if inspiring, starts to move people towards where they want to be. So I pair this idea of creative tension with Glenda Yang and Royce Holliday's human systems dynamics work, and think really about how do humans and human systems change, and how do I as an evaluator help people see really clearly where they are and where they want to go. People usually overestimate how clearly they understand these two things. So that's how I think about know people. Hold a transformative vision. So have a clear vision of what you want. And this is really different than having a vision statement on paper, right? So a lot of times when I work with clients, they have a vision on paper. And when I start to ask, what does this look like? They say, well, I'm not sure. The board voted this in 2 years ago. Or that doesn't quite describe what we do. So there's something about having a vision that is alive. And to go back to this part about energy, the vision should feel like it contains energy, so that when people talk about the vision, they get animated, they get inspired. They might see that there's difficulties, but they feel that they can overcome these difficulties because they want it so badly. So have a really clear vision of what you want. And I use the adaptive action cycle when I facilitate this, what, so what, now what, to really spend time in the what. What is it that you want? And then we can move into working towards this vision. So working towards this vision, the way I think about it for me is be good at my work. And work can be raising a family, making art, building roads, farming, evaluation. Whatever your vision is and whatever work you do towards that, do your best. Stay up to date on current practice, work ethically, work with integrity, keep moving yourself forward, keep moving your organization, your profession, and your field forward. I think to take responsibility for the Anthropocene means not, and our role in it, means not just continuing to improve ourselves, but to lift up the others around us through our work when we can. And last, because there is never a clear path between where we are and where we want to go, I have found principles to be the most powerful way to steer people with disparate experiences towards a common and shared vision. So what this means to me is be really clear about the values you hold. So you have your values and you have your vision, and the principles are your values translated into action. So if you value people having homes and you imagine a world where everyone is housed, what principles lead you there? Because there's a lot of ways you can do that. You can give away homes, you can give away money, you can have fewer people. So there's a missing, if we only have values and vision, there's a missing piece. And to me, it's that principles-driven piece where we state explicitly how we're going to take action to get to that vision in a way that is grounded in values. Okay, so we have know people, have a transformative vision. Now we have take transformative action. I've been realizing a lot also that I can only control so much. I can only change so much. So what I'm thinking a lot about lately is cultivating the conditions and adopting the approach of setting the conditions for change to happen. So all systems are capable of self-organization and emergent change, but certain conditions can impact the speed and the direction of that change. Also take risk. Something that Nassim Taleb, the author of Skin in the Game, talks a lot about is that there is a power asymmetry. If the people impacted by the work you're doing have a lot to lose and you have almost nothing to lose. And so we are not true partners in that change work if we're going in with nothing to lose and can walk away relatively unscathed. Or of course, we're all interconnected, right? So we're not unscathed, but we can feel like we are in the moment. And so some of you may have heard this quote from Lilla Watson. She said, if you've come here to help me, you're wasting your time. But if you've come here because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let's work together. And so if your liberation is bound up in the work, then what are you willing to risk? Something I ask myself a lot. The third transformative action that I think we need to take is caring. And there's something that we've done in Western work settings where We care about people to a certain extent. We care about them to the extent that they can do their job well, but we don't care about them, the whole person. And so what I try to do is welcome whole people, normalize accepting care, and create opportunities for continued self-care and self-discovery. And that we say there is no work that's separate from caring for ourselves and caring for each other. So the fourth step is reflect, and reflection is wise action. Reflection is not something to do if you have time. Reflection is not something that you just do personally in a journal at home. Reflection is something that we need to do as individuals, as teams, as co-creators. And I based this definition of reflection on Getting to Maybe that Michael wrote with Francis Wesley and Brenda Zimmerman. And the way they describe reflection is taking time to stand still long enough that you can see what's going on around you, and then taking the time to understand the flow of events in the context of the moment. You evaluate the impact of your actions. You draw implications from what you see and understand. So reflection has a really clear flow and process to it, and it allows you to move into the next step, which is repeat. So everything is circular. One of my friends and colleagues, Nikki Bowman, says in her indigenous culture, you can't ever get lost because you're walking in a circle. So just keep walking and you'll get back to something that you recognize. And that's how this work is to me. We are not moving in a straight line. We're circling back again and again, but we're never returning to the same place. So you've changed, the world has changed, start again. Know yourself, know the people in the world around you, understand how change is happening, reassess that vision, assess whether these are the right actions, reflect, repeat. So I just wanted to share some examples now of what this looks like for me in my work. My work and my life. So same flow, I'm gonna walk through it in the same order. So for Know Myself, one example that I share is that this is one of my son, Ari, and he died when he was 4.5. And I was pretty sure that I might die, but I had a son who was 2, almost 3, and I needed to stay alive for him. And so I made a choice to heal on purpose. And that's a play on words where I wanted to heal by choice and I wanted to heal by pursuing my purpose, but I had no idea what that was. And so what I've been doing in the 9 years since then is decide that I had to figure out who I was. And it's been a terrifying ride, honestly, because of the things that I hid from myself. But choosing to heal on purpose and become whole so that I can identify my purpose is how I've come to know myself. Know others. I grew up in New Hampshire, which is on the northeast coast of the United States, and the town I grew up in is 98.8% white. I didn't know that whiteness wasn't normal, I didn't know it isn't a culture. I just thought whiteness is. And so when I moved to Washington, D.C., I still thought, well, as long as I'm a good white person, everything will be okay. And that was not true. I had a lot to learn and I had a lot to unlearn. And so I've been actively seeking to understand the limits of my upbringing, to shed some of it, to take on new understanding, and to assume that I'm never done. So I spent a lot of time thinking about different perspectives, from I am to I am part of to I see, and learning how other people know. And I don't just mean intellectually know, but spiritually know and emotionally know, and all the different ways that people know. Know how people change. I've really been thinking about working with energy. And this is often because when I am in a room facilitating a group of people with a tricky topic, their words might be saying one thing, but energetically their bodies and their interactions are saying something very different. And so I've been really practicing from an energetic sense to read the room and to facilitate energy and notice when energy has become stopped, or it's leaking away, or it's becoming alive again. And then paying attention to what is happening to cause those shifts in energy. And I can learn so much more than from words alone. I also have come to understand that we are the stories we tell ourselves and others. I can say, I'm inadequate, I am an imposter. And the longer I say that to myself, the more I believe it. And so to change myself means changing my story. To work with communities and to think about what's possible, we also have to disrupt narratives and rewrite stories. So these are just two ways in my work, in my life, that I think about how people change and what it takes to be on that change path with people. And like I said before, my clear vision of what I want is a whole, beautiful, and just world. My skill or my artistry is shaping containers that allow things to happen. So this is my third business. The first one I started, and it was to support families who had kids with chronic illness. When my son died, I left that. And then I co-founded Terra Luna Collaborative, which is a wonderful evaluation consulting firm. But then I realized that I want to do more than evaluation. I want to do purpose-driven work, and I want to use all of my evaluation tools and skills to do this work, to bring this vision into reality, but that I needed a different container to make this work happen. So my vision is shaping the container that lets people do this. So we work in really particular ways. Again, this comes out from that utilization focused list. There's a lot of things like identify use and users that are typical in evaluation, but what's a little different here, I think, is that we talk a lot about readiness, and that's readiness culturally, emotionally. We co-create in all of our projects, and we always have guiding principles. We go through the process that is more familiar of acting, learning, and adapting as we go. That's classic developmental evaluation. But we also care and share as part of the work. We always facilitate this work as individual and collective journeying. And we locate this in mind, body, spirit, heart, culture, in place. So we say, we can't talk about this conceptually as though it's living in the air, that all of this lives in our body. It lands in our body. It comes from our spirit. It comes from our heart. Be principles driven. So I have my own personal principles, and I actually developed these in 2015 when I was working with Michael on my dissertation and doing principles focused developmental evaluation. And I thought, these principles are amazing, but what are my principles? And I realized that when I come alive is when my light shines brighter and others shines brighter. That when I am connected and building connection, when I am inspired and inspiring, when I'm working towards social justice, and when my whole heart, mind, and spirit are in it. And actually what I've learned since then is I left out body, because I did not want to include my body, but I need to. In the same way, those are my personal principles. I don't expect everyone to live by those principles, but when we're in the container of inspired change, we have guiding principles for how we do our work here. And it informs everything from our proposals. We have sweatshirts with it. We have business cards on it. Our performance reviews are shaped around this. They are the air that we breathe. And the way that we designed them, and what I've been doing lately, is having guiding principles that are in interdependent pairs. So these principles in and of themselves hold that creative tension that to me animates the work. So these are our 4 interdependent pairs that serve as our guiding principles. And if you want to see more language about what these mean, we have that on our website. How do we cultivate the conditions? One is by working in teams, not just of evaluators, but artists, journalists, doctors, community organizers, and more. The evaluation and complex change calls on us to think like evaluators, but also think like other people who have real gifts to contribute and other ways of seeing and working. We also facilitate work that is intentionally invitational, co-creative, trusting, aligned, spacious, and rooted. And I could talk forever about what each of those terms mean, but we're really intentional about setting up those conditions in our work. And when we choose methods, we use methods that are rigorous and appropriate, but also healing and creative. Those are 3 things we do to set intentional conditions. We take risks, and I'm just going to use I statements here. I am willing to be wrong. I am willing to lose clients, and I am willing to have a business that fails. I don't know when I start talking like this to a client if they're going to think I'm nuts or not. I don't know when I call them out for having their actions not match their words, or asking them to live into our guiding principles, if they'll respond well or not. But that is the only way I can work right now. I don't know if this is a business that can succeed, but I have to try. This is my way to live out my purpose and my principles in the world. And I would regret at that deathbed moment if I didn't try. So I have to be willing to fail. How do we know? So I've said a lot, caring matters. One thing that we do is to normalize crying. And I often joke that someone will be crying at the end of a meeting. And I think people cry in maybe 80% of our meetings because we go to the places that are real. And people often feel so relieved to be seen and so relieved to be able to bring their whole self into the work that there are tears. We also normalize accepting care. It can be hard for people who are givers to also receive care. It can be hard to say yes when care is offered. It can be hard to say no when you're protecting yourself. So we make well-being a part of every meeting. It's a daily practice. We always start with people. I reflect a lot by reading. I think, I write, I talk to myself, I talk to others, and I have spirit guides that I talk to. I talk to nature. And through all of this thinking and talking and writing, I sharpen my ideas, I integrate new ones, I discard what happened to not be true. And I am in this repeat cycle, sometimes within minutes, sometimes over the arc of years. So like I said, this is my 3rd business. Every time I get a little closer, every day I find a way to do better, even if that's through failing and feels pretty awful. So those are my 5 steps for inviting the whole person into the game. And this part makes me feel a little nervous because how I identified my guiding principles, it's not traditional. This is not going to sound academic. My son who died, I sometimes feel like I receive messages from him. And so what I'll show you on the next screen is the words he told me when I was really, really lost. And this was the process I followed to come up with my guiding principles. I was crying. I was so upset. I actually canceled the meeting and I went and I sat in a park with my computer and I said, what do I need to know? And then I just typed, and this is what came out. Build new roots, strengthen existing ones. Make a list of the places that make you feel good, strong, and supported. Notice what it is that makes you feel this way. Notice where you want your community to grow. Follow your intuition, feed your joy. Trust that the magnetism of your orbit will attract the right people. Make a list of people you want to bring back into our orbit. Start setting up lunches and dinners. ask 5 people for help, offer 5 people help, write 6 people a letter, make small investments in your orbit, your expanding family, your community, and it will yield larger and more powerful gains than you can even imagine. And the simple part of this that I really have taken to heart since then is feed your joy, follow your intuition. And I kept a journal for a while of all those times that I felt like my joy was fed in a small way or a big way. And when I looked at that after a couple months, it became really clear what gives me joy, and that where I have joy is where I have the most energy and where I'm most able to attract people to the work of building a vision of a whole, beautiful, and just world. So that's what I have. I have a paper that I'll post with footnotes. It was hard to footnote in this, so I just put in a list of references. There's 2 pages of books and thinking that I relied on as I pulled these ideas together.
Amazing, Nora. Absolutely amazing. This is Glenn, and just want to say thank you on behalf of the Blue Marble team. What you've just done is given us really a Blue Marble meditation, unlike any that we've really ever had on this webinar platform, just because it really integrated heart, mind, soul, and universe all together. So thank you. I mean, it's truly inspiring. Oops, sorry about that. So there is a question, and I'm encouraging others who are on the call to put any questions or comments in the chat box. And in fact, another one, 2 have just shown up. So let me begin with the one by Andrea Lisa, who wrote, in your role as an uplifter and change agent, how do you attract what uplifts you and maintains your energy for the expansion you are desiring for yourself?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's actually something that my husband helps me with a lot. It's the guiding principle of be and become. I am such a doer, and I went through a well-being project once where they told us that change makers are addicted to doing, that we all needed to go to Doers Anonymous. And I always feel like I need to do one more thing. I hate the feeling of letting someone down, of someone being disappointed in me. And so I always want to say yes. I always want to do one more thing. And my husband, Andy, will say, but what about the be part? It seems like maybe you just need to be home today. It seems like maybe you need to sleep in. And I try not to fight him on it, but sometimes I honestly do. This is the hardest principle for me to live into. When I take that day off, when I take that long weekend, I can't tell you how much spaciousness opens in my mind. And when the spaciousness opens, the things that I've been wanting to think or feel, but I haven't had time to, sort of flood in, and I get re-energized and re-grounded. So for me, it's the be part of be and become that helps me feed my energy and my soul. Thanks for the question. It was great.
Beautiful. This is from Giovanna Montagner. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that somewhat correctly. Thank you so much for sharing your experience. I love the very personal way you approach and talk about your evaluation practice. Now I'm wondering, how can I bring that to the table in highly technocratic work environments where this is most needed, but not a part of what is considered quote unquote professional? Any suggestions based upon your experience?
Yes, and this is something that works for me and may not work for everyone, of course, but I want to go back to that energy piece, because a lot of times when I'm in a meeting and people are staying in that technocratic professional space, their bodies are feeling all kinds of things. So I'll be talking with someone and they'll say, we developed this, or we're doing this, and then we had to, and they'll grab their neck. And I'll say, oh, what what just happened there? You were telling me about something you did, but it caused you to really change your position, and I'm just wondering what that was. What is that feeling? And then I actually did this in that kind of environment, and someone said, the best I can say is that it felt icky. And I'm like, okay, icky is a valid feeling. What felt icky? And so it's creating small opportunities to invite in a different kind of conversation. It's normalizing it, and it can start small, but once the crack gets big enough, it just breaks open. So try something small, take that little risk. And if they don't bite, that's okay. Try at a different meeting. But I think it's really reading the whole person and responding to that whole person and not just to the agenda. And I truly find relief to be the number one experience people have once they get past their resistance.
Wonderful. Well, I have a question. You did a beautiful job of going through sort of the roots of principles-focused evaluation, then utilization-focused evaluation, clearly developmental. What about Blue Marble has inspired you that sort of integrates those different dimensionalities, both in your practice and in your personal world? You mentioned the Anthropocene, but what about Blue Marble has sort of done that sort of magic alchemy in how you're seeing yourself and your practice in the world?
That's such a good question. So I'm working on a case study for Blue Marble with Charmaine and with one of my clients, GHR. And the first thing that came naturally to me, because I had developed guiding principles with GHR, was, and it's a global project, it's a Blue Marble project to a large extent, although not intentionally so. What I wanted to do was line up our guiding principles against the Blue Marble guiding principles. And when I hit that whole section about this needs to be transformation, and you can't expect to have transformation without a theory of transformation. And once you have your theory of transformation, then you need to be aligned with it and you need to have fidelity to it. And I realized, oh my goodness, I do not have a theory of transformation. Like, I work in theories of change and logic models. That's how I was trained. I hope for transformation, but I didn't have a theory of transformation. So that was back in December that Charmaine and I met, and I was like, oh my goodness, Charmaine, what do I do? Like, just not about this case study. The case study will be fine, but what do I do without a theory of transformation? And so I've been obsessed for the last couple of months. And if you look at any of my Twitter, Instagram feeds, I'm always tweeting about transformation now. So I think that's what has changed for me, is raising the bar to not just what is change, but what is transformative change. And it absolutely will become, in fact, we spend a lot of meetings here working on developing our theory of transformation that we then want to be able to test and produce an evidence-based theory.
Oh, that's really, really helpful. And in fact, one of the things that we'll be developing with the Blue Marble website is transformation systems mapping. How do we see these things? Because we all see the world in very, very different ways, different patterns, different colors. And I love your focus on colors. But we're now working on ways to, how do we see these transformation systems and begin to help maybe unpack what might be leverage points and what might be ways of understanding movement forward. So I'd love to see your contributions to some of that mapping process.
Well, yeah, Glenn, I just want to say that's one of the reasons that I had two things in my PowerPoint. One was using methods that are not just appropriate and rigorous, but also creative and healing. I feel like we're woefully underprepared to meet the challenge of these days with the current methods we have. And there are all kinds of fields that are doing things that actually are evaluation or could be evaluation with little tweaks that work well in complexity. So I think that there's a lot of opportunity to develop methods or to invite methods over from different fields. And so we need to be creative. And then the other part is share when I say share, it's webinars, it's mentoring, it's conference proceedings, it's blog posts, it's whatever it is that we can all help each other move forward.
Wonderful. Well, this is a comment from Beris Gwynn, who I think is joining us from Geneva, Switzerland. And she writes, we have constructed, quote unquote, multilateral systems that allow no time or space for, quote unquote, being, and certainly don't expect it to be, quote unquote, measured. Is it just a pipe dream to imagine that people who have or want to have skin in the game can connect in this connection, become part of a powerful transformative movement?
Yeah. I can speak from I don't know if it's a pipe dream, honestly, which is why I'm willing to have a business that fails. I will say that a paper that's about to come out in maybe next month, and then about the Wellbeing Project. It's a project that I worked on with Ashoka, Esselin, Skoll, Synergos, and Schwab, the Schwab Foundation, where we tried to shift the field of social entrepreneurship to be more supportive of well-being. And it was really hard because the current model was that social entrepreneurs are the hero, and you sort of work them until they burn out and just see how far you can get. And the premise of the program was that you can't create well things if people aren't well, and that you needed to invest in people's well-being because they matter, not because you're trying to get to a particular impact. It was a 3-year experiment. I was the embedded evaluator and researcher. And what we found is that it was possible to shift people, and it is shifting the field, and that people are more collaborative, have more energy, are more loving and more trusting when they take time to care for their own well-being. So that's one piece of evidence that will be coming out. And I think also we'll have a sort of a more soundbite article in the Stanford Social Innovation Review in March. But what I'm finding here is that people think that they can't take time to be, but they're all so tired. So I work with a lot of leaders of color who are working for social justice issues in communities of color, and people are exhausted and they know they can't last. And so part of what I do is interrupt this rhetoric of we just have to do one more thing, that we can't stop, that if we stop, everything will fall apart. And to say to them, it looks like you're exhausted. Can we even just take 10 minutes? And people fight me sometimes, and I wonder with them, why are you fighting me? Why are you fighting taking time to breathe? And sometimes people come around, almost every time, actually, I've had success. But of course, people usually know what they're getting when they come to me. So I don't know if it's a pipe dream. I think it's worth trying.
Well, this is now, I think, our last question, and then after your response, we'll turn it over to Michael to close us out. But this is from Etta, and I'll do a little bit of paraphrasing. I love your part of elaborating that no one can do things alone, hence the blue marble. What advice can be given to evaluators who feel threatened by rising evaluators or anyone shining more? How can they handle the changing world other than pushing colleagues down?
That's awesome question. I certainly, the way I experience it is I get jealous, and my husband, who's a novelist, he hates reading that other people sometimes have gotten award nominations for their novel. It's like, I feel like it's part of human nature, maybe it's part of our culture, to just feel that jealousy when someone's on a similar track and seems to be moving ahead faster. But I guess where I go back to knowing myself and being curious about myself and wondering what is so threatening to me. What do I think that I'm losing? What is it that I think they have that I don't? Does this mean that I need to change something, or does this mean that I just need to sit with the feeling of being uncomfortable? So I bring a feeling like that, I bring back to that idea of knowing myself and being curious about what that means, reflecting and deciding whether I need to do something about it or just be aware that that feeling is there.
Thank you, Nora, for sharing.
You're welcome.
Tremendous session and important. You just nailed what the Blue Marble total body is all about. Great change. I appreciate that. Charmaine is bringing up some upcoming activities. And Charmaine, you want to just run through those?
Sure. So if you aren't already a member of the Blue Marble Evaluation Network, we'd love for you to join. It's a place for folks trying this work out, trying to figure out how this connects with your work to come together and build a community of practice. This is the website, and this is where you can join. And here are some of the things that we're trying to offer as part of that network. Emails, webinars, discussion forum, abilities to connect, as well as ongoing conversations with blogs and contributing like Nora has and others to expanding our understanding of how this applies to different contexts. So if you haven't already, hope you will join us. And we also have a book club with Michael. We're reading the Blue Marble Evaluation book month by month, and we're on chapter 2 in their short chapters. So if you haven't started, you can always join. The next live conversation will be February 27th with Michael, and there's a discussion forum online, and that's only for members of the network. So we'd love for you to join that conversation. And I will be sending out the recording of this webinar with a survey for any feedback, so we can continue to offer things that are useful to you. So I'll put that link in the chat box as well. That's all I have.
And Thank you, Charmaine.
And I think the next Blue Marble webinar is scheduled for March 18th, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So we hope you can all join us then, and we'll be sending out more information of the upcoming Blue Marble webinar series.
Great. Well, thank you all for joining us. Again, thanks to Nora for enlarging our understanding of skin in the game to whole self and whole body. An important change and that I know is exemplified in both your practice and your life. So thank you for joining us. You will get the recording, and we will continue the dialogue. With that, we'll sign off. Have a great rest of your day, everyone. Thank you, Nora.
Thank you. Bye.